Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys in a Pod. My name is Dominick Peraino. I'm joined by my co-host, Benjamin Martinez. It is Friday, January 26th of 2018. Ben, how you doing?
Good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We have a packed show lined up today. We're starting off. We're going to be talking about gun control and the school shooting that happened this week in Kentucky. Hopefully we're going to touch on Mueller's investigation into the Trump campaign, the text messages that were supposedly lost and then found again by the FBI, talking a little bit about how Trump stands on all of that stuff. I'm going to be talking about something happened a couple weeks ago, but when Richard Spencer, the kind of self-proclaimed or non-self-proclaimed leader of the alt-right, went on Andy Warski's show, talking a little bit about that incident, I'll call it, possibly getting to the bipartisan immigration bill, and then we're going to close off talking about the very recent allegations of sexual assault on Michigan State University's campus, what was going on there, and the implications. All right,
perfect. Yeah,
cool. So
great topic.
Gun control, school shooting. Why don't you bring us in a little bit? What happened this week?
Sure. If you guys haven't heard about yet, which is kind of weird considering that it was probably the biggest news of the week. But
actually, I heard very little about it in the news. The day it happened, it was like not even front page New York Times, I don't think. But
what?
Yeah,
no way.
Like I had to search for it.
There's no way. Anyways, I got notifications about it on my phone. But yeah, this week, I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday morning. There was a school shooting in Western Kentucky, specifically Marshall County High School. 2 have been killed, and I think there were 4 others that had various injuries. But basically, the shooter was a student. I think they haven't released any information on him because he is a juvenile. But he is in authorities, and I'm pretty sure they're going through the whole process right now. But it started off in the morning, right before classes actually started, when most of the student body was, I think, meeting in wherever they usually hang out right before school starts. And he just started firing onto students with a gun. So one girl was killed instantly, and I actually saw in the news that she was calling her parents as she died. So she actually got shot and called her. Yeah, she actually got shot and called her parents, and her mom answered the phone. And by the time she responded, her daughter was already dead, and she was trying to answer her daughter, and she knew immediately something was wrong. And then when she heard about the school shooting, she figured that her daughter was one of the ones that had been killed. And then the second student that was killed, he was a 15-year-old male. He actually died in the ambulance going to the hospital, and he was able to see his parents before he died too. They stopped in the ambulance before they were going to take him to the hospital. But yeah, pretty tragic stuff, really. But it's just, I feel it's almost weird that we're almost desensitized to it. It's almost like it's like, oh wow, it's been 6 months since the shooting. That feels like it's been a long time, kind of thing. It's just, I think it's just awful because just in the society we live in today, it's the most regular thing about seeing a school shooting. And I'm pretty sure the same area, 30 miles away, experienced a school shooting less than 20-30 years ago. So it's a pretty, from what I heard, it's a pretty small community just in Western Kentucky. So they're pretty sad about the whole experience and everything. Obviously, a lot of messages have been sent out to them from local congressmen and congresswomen and all over the country, sending out their respects. And yeah, so that's just a little bit of background information about it. We're going to get into a little bit more later about our opinions on the issue and specifically about gun control. But is there anything you wanted to add, Dominic?
Yeah. No, I mean, just in terms of summary, I think that pretty much does it. The one thing I'll add is, of course, after immediately from people who don't want to accept that this is a problem, the instant response is, well, it's too soon to talk about it. And I honestly I know before, and we'll talk about gun control, of course, but I think whenever I hear that it's too soon to talk about it, I honestly find that that's way more disrespectful than talking about solutions to the problem right after it happened. I think if you're just an innocent bystander to something like this, I think that if that was me, I would want to know instantly what would have been done to fix it, so it doesn't happen to anybody else. And I think
I agree completely.
to use their death as an excuse to avoid talking about it, I think is so much more disrespectful and anti-free speech than possibly talking about what we could do to fix the situation in the future. Like, talking about it too soon, I think that's just a completely disrespectful attitude to have.
I completely agree.
Which, of course, was instantly decried by people who don't want to talk about it. So,
and I think one of the best quotes that I've seen this week, and I think pretty much exactly how I feel about the topic, is that congressmen and congresswomen will send their respect and their prayers, but they won't send their actions.
Exactly. It's so true. I mean,
like, immediately as soon as these things happen, you see a flood of tweets, a flood of messages out from basically everyone saying, oh, we're sending our respects and our prayers to everyone who has been affected by this tragedy. We'll keep them in our minds and in our hearts. All right, that's great. That's good stuff. That sounds great. But what are you actually going to do to fix the problem? What are you actually going to do to make sure tomorrow and the next day and next month someone isn't going to lose their child for the same exact reason? Nothing. They don't do anything, Dominic, which, I mean, we'll talk about a little bit later. But, yeah, just kind of segueing into what our opinions are on the topic. But clearly, like, I just want to say that, like, we don't want the show to be, like, a huge liberal thing. Like, I wouldn't say exactly that I'm liberal or lean Democratic. I'd like to say I'm pretty neutral. But, I mean, in this certain topic, I am very, very left in terms of I think gun control is a thing that needs to happen, should have happened yesterday. Or, you know, it's ridiculous to think that there has been nothing done in that area for this long after just so many crazy tragedies. And like just last year we had the Vegas shooting that killed like 59 people, and still nothing's been done. I just think it's ridiculous.
Exactly. So what do you think needs to be done?
I think a series of things needs to be done. I think basic stuff, like immediately following the Vegas shooting, I'll just talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that allowed the guy to shoot so many rounds in such a little period of time was these thing called bump stocks. I don't know if you know what those are exactly.
I heard about the bump stocks in the aftermath of it, but why don't you explain?
Yeah, basically bump stocks are things that you add to the end of a gun. So in this case, it was a semi-automatic assault rifle. And basically what it allows you to do is to make it basically from a semi-assault rifle to almost an automatic rifle. Because basically what the bump stock does is when the gun recoils, that it uses that motion to help you shoot the next round. So basically instead of a round taking you, 10 seconds to shoot, it'll maybe take you 5 seconds.
So it ups the firing rate and it extends the range, is what I understand it does.
Yes, basically. Okay. So following the Vegas shooting, even the NRA came out publicly to say that they were in support of like making sure that there was some sort of gun controls for bump stock specifically. The NRA, all right, they came out in favor of administrative bump stock fire stock regulations. After that, there were a bipartisan bill, supposedly, that was going to be in support of the prohibition of bump fire stocks. All right?
Okay.
I think they had 39 Democratic co-sponsors in the Senate, and it was introduced by a Republican initially. As of now...
Do you remember who the Republican was off the top of your head? It's okay if you don't.
I think it was... Not exactly sure.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah. But I remember one of the Democratic people that was very for it was Dianne Feinstein. I think she's from California.
Yep.
Yeah. But I'm like it had bipartisan support for sure. And as of now, nothing has been done in Congress.
Yeah.
And I think House leaders, like some of the Republican leaders, even went out to say that the regulation should be decided by like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. But like that's just ridiculous for you guys to just waive your responsibility and say, oh no, this bureau should take care of it. We don't have anything to do with it.
Like the thing that like really gets me is like have you seen this ad that the Trump campaign put out? It's online only. And it's talking about like the wall, basically. I think it's talking about immigration. And one of the like most explicit like parameters of the ad is Democrats will be complicit for every death that a illegal immigrant causes, which has like I could go into the reasons why that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I think if that's a comparison that gets to be drawn, I think a comparison that really gets to be drawn is that Republicans who control both houses of Congress and have been against gun control legislation for decades, I think they get to be complicit in every death that a school shooting causes, because
for sure. I mean, there are ways to limit this. It's not like it's not out of reach. It's been successful in other countries. It's not like we're going to be the first ones to try it and we're going to be the guinea pigs. No, it has been shown that other countries have successfully implemented gun control. And I'm not saying that we should get rid of all the guns, but I'm saying things as simple as bump stock regulations, things that even the NRA has approved of, and yet there's no action on it. I think that's just ridiculous. Something as small as that and nothing. I think it should go as far as semi-automatic weapons shouldn't be sold. I think it should go way further than that. I think every person that owns a gun, especially people that have children in the house, should be forced to have a safe in their house to keep their guns. I mean, this kid that just caused the school shooting, most likely his dad or mom had a gun in the house. Most likely they didn't have a safety box. And the kid probably knew where they kept the gun, took the gun to school, and caused the shooting. Like, that's so preventable.
Yeah.
That's easy. Like, it's not like it's hard to do. I mean, we're not the arguments that a lot of them put on is, oh, you can't take away all the bad people. You can put gun controls, but it's not going to stop bad people from killing. True, we're not going to stop everything, but we can definitely try to control it. We can definitely try to minimize it to some extent. Exactly. We're not just like it's an awful excuse to say, oh, like we can't do anything about bad people, so let's not do anything about it. That's awful. That's an awful mindset to have.
Here, I'll play devil's advocate just so we don't hear our own voices bouncing off the walls here. One very common argument, and one that seems kind of legitimate to me, is the reason that gun control legislation worked in places like, say, Australia, which had its first major shooting in like
1996.
Yeah, I was gonna say 1999. In the 1990s, they instantly implemented gun control legislation, and they haven't had a mass shooting since. Some statistic like that, I'm sure, gets bounced around a lot.
Yes,
one of the reasons people point to as to why it worked there and why it wouldn't work here is because guns could easily come in from Mexico in the United States, whereas in Australia they don't have that similar border to which it would be easy to smuggle guns. What would your response be to something like that?
My response to that is yes, even if like people always bring that up about how there's black market and things like that, and there's going to be ways for people to find guns regardless, and I don't disagree with that. Yes, if you want a gun in America, you could possibly easily find it, but that doesn't take away the fact that we could make it less accessible. We could make it harder on them. If we have a black market they have to buy a gun for, it's probably not going to cost the same as what it costs now. If you go in, I today, no joke, no kidding when I say this, I could drive down to Kentucky today, walk into a gun store, and leave with a gun in like 2 hours. All they would need to do is have a quick background check on me, make sure I haven't had any felonies, which I haven't, and after that, they make sure, and I'm over 18, so I walk away with a gun. It's easy as that, really. That's what I'm trying to say. Just make it harder to access it. I'm not saying we're going to get rid of it completely. There's still going to be a supply no matter what, because black market and smuggling and whatnot. But if you make it less accessible, you're going to deter people from getting it. People, like even common criminals that might want to do some sort of crime, if the gun costs now $10,000 through the black market compared to hundreds of dollars and maybe $1,000, that person's going to think twice about whether they want to invest that sort of money into a gun. That's my argument against that. But, people nitpick all the time about that, about how, oh, it might have worked there, it might not work here. And people even say, oh, like Chicago has a pretty strict gun regulations, yet Chicago has one of the highest crime rates. Like you can nitpick data all the time, but when you take it as a whole, and there has been many studies that have shown it as a whole, countries that have a higher percentage of gun have a higher amounts of gun related deaths. It's simple as that.
Yeah, I agree. There is doesn't have to do gun control. There's a little bit of like a scratching coming over from your side. I don't know if you're like rustling around or like you're sitting on your bed or something, but like I don't know what that is. Maybe you're trying to like fix that, but I do definitely hear major scratching there. You're good. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a really big just discrepancy. I mean, the other argument that is always brought up is that it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. Which I love when people say, because it's just so hypocritical that in August of this year we had 49 Republicans trying to take away mental health coverage for 16 million Americans or whatever. Like it's just hilarious to me that what it shows to me is that they just don't see it as a problem, right? If they're willing to show, okay, well, guns, the solution isn't guns, it's mental health, and then they don't do anything about mental health, they don't care about school shootings. You can't be a pro-safety candidate at that point. You just can't, and that goes for anyone. That goes for any member of the House, any member of the Senate, the President of the United States, any member of state or local government. If you simultaneously hold the views that like we shouldn't have more tight regulations on guns, and then go and vote against healthcare reform that would make mental health coverage accessible to these people, you just don't care. I think that's really, really blatant. And then of course
that's a great point, Dominic.
Yeah.
And I think honestly it just shows that how defensive basically people that are against gun control are. They just kind of throw these arguments that are convenient for them at the time without really starting to think about where their arguments fail. And I think that's one of the major things that I have against gun control is really you pull up most arguments against it and there's no legitimacy in any argument other than an argument where one says, hey, I like guns, I enjoy them, I go hunting every weekend, or I go to the gun range with my family and I enjoy it. That's the only actual argument I've heard as for why we should keep our guns. Because any other argument that has been made as to why people should be allowed to have guns in today's age isn't valid.
Right, exactly. And to be clear, we're not talking about taking everybody's guns.
No, we're not.
Yeah, like we're talking about marginal restrictions. Very reasonable. We're living in the 21st century. People who talk about their Second Amendment rights, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison never would have possibly conceived that the muskets they were using in those days would be the equivalent of the legislation they were writing. The equivalent would be automatic rifles with bump stocks in the 21st century. It just doesn't exist.
No, and beyond that, the Second Amendment, people always love to paraphrase it as the right to bear arms, but they failed to read the first half of the amendment, which is it's for a militia. That's the purpose of it. Guess what? If we had to raise an army today against the United States government, if we wanted to overthrow the government, we would be, what would we have? We have a couple handguns, maybe some semi-assault rifles against the government that has nuclear weapons, drones. Are you kidding me? Like it's in today's world, it's not logical.
Yeah, and I've actually argued with people about this before, and they will literally, there's so much cognitive dissonance that they will literally argue that a civilian army would be able to overthrow our government. Like, dog.
In what way?
Like, do you realize that our military, not only like, let's like taking apart, the fact that they have training and we've got military strategy and intelligence and all that like packed into the military, just the pure dollar amount that goes into the United States military. We have a larger military than what, the next 26 countries combined? You really think some Texans with some automatic rifles are really going to be able to do anything about this? Like, no, dude. And then, like, yeah, it's just ridiculous. And not to mention, like, a lot of these school shootings aren't even, like, even if you're really worried about, like, the government becoming oppressive and wanting to, like, have a militia to overthrow them, these school shootings don't have to, school shootings especially, don't have to be done with automatic rifles. I mean, it would make it a lot easier if they got an automatic rifle, but dad's pistol that he keeps in a lockbox under his bed, that's not overthrowing our government, dude. Like,
I mean,
background checks solve this problem and still leave open the possibility of raising a militia. Like, it's just, there's a disconnect.
I think the initial reaction to when they hear gun control is, oh, they're trying to take away my guns. We're not trying to take away your guns. We're trying to regulate it to make sure that guns aren't as accessible as they are today, and to make common sense things reality. Like what I said earlier, bump stocks. Even the NRA itself agreed that there should be something done about it, and yet nothing has been done. I don't know if that's what that comes down to. I don't know if it's people in the House are just afraid to even deter any of their constituents who might have guns. I just don't know. But I just think it's ridiculous how something as simple as bump stocks that everyone agrees. Even I've talked to gun owners about this before. Gun owners say, I think it's ridiculous that bump stocks are accessible today. How something just that simple cannot be executed. I don't know.
And I just thought of this. This is a really, really, really interesting parallel that just exposes so much hypocrisy to me. Think of the voter ID debate, okay, in places like North Carolina. Idiots who believe that voter IDs are fine, right, to solve the non-existent problem of voter fraud, of which there's like a 0.00001% voter fraud rate in the United States. Because why would you commit voter fraud to get one extra vote at the possibility of going to prison for life? It just doesn't make sense, right? We don't have a problem with voter fraud. So what do these people say when they're arguing against the Supreme Court that ruled that when in places like North Carolina, they asked for specific racial breakdowns of data, and they shut down DMVs that could give out the voter licenses in those places specifically targeted towards African Americans? What did these people say? Well, couldn't these black people just have driven to other places? Couldn't these, it's not impossible, right? And then, a reasonable person would say, well, yeah, but you're just decreasing the opportunity of these people to obtain them. So obviously, based on racial discrimination, you're decreasing the amount of people who are allowed to vote. But then these same people, they turn around in the gun control debate, and when somebody says something like, well, I want to just regulate bump stocks, or I want to I want increased background checks, increased stringentness in background checks at gun shows or something. Then these people turn around and they're like, whoa, you're taking my guns. You are taking, it's like, no, I'm just actually trying to make it harder, decrease the amount of guns. Like, they'll go completely 180 other direction. Whereas before, policy that's like targeted, not specifically targeted, like letter of the law to do something is can never be interpreted in another way. On the gun debate, policy that is specifically targeted to reduce something suddenly goes to the extreme, and they fail to look at anything with any type of critical lens at all. I just find that really, really hypocritical. That it just, no matter what they want, it suits their narrative, whichever way it goes. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's going back to the point I said earlier about how basically they come up with any argument that suits them at the time without failing to really realize the consequences of that argument.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of brought that up with the whole mental illness thing earlier, and I think you bring it up here again. Like politicians nowadays, I think the problem is that, they're career politicians. All they really care about at the end of the day is, all right, am I going to be able to get reelected next year and keep my job and keep my paycheck? Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And whatever they can do to make sure that they can appease their constituents and to make sure that they don't look awful, and they'll say whatever argument that's going to help them at that time, without there's obviously some exceptions. There's some people that out there, that some congressmen, congresswomen, and senators that truly care about their constituents and are actually trying to make a difference. But I think for the most part, what the incentive in today's House and today's Senate is basically to keep your job and keep your paycheck going.
Absolutely. And I mean, this ties in. Why do you think President Trump didn't tweet after the school shooting in Kentucky about it? But, possible terrorism erupts in New York City, and he's the first to call for, tighter vetting for immigrants, right? It's because of the NRA. It's because, he has those loyalties, not just to the NRA, to other politicians who are in the NRA's pocket. It's really sad that it just precludes us from getting any meaningful dialogue going on the situation. Like I would love to have a conversation with somebody talking about like what the best regulation would be. One that like is the least limiting to people's personal liberties while also protecting us the most. I think that would be a really interesting conversation, but there's nobody who's willing to have that conversation.
No, they're not, because the NRA has funded over $60 million to Congress to ensure that they have them in their back pocket. And any sort of mention of gun control in Congress will instantly, any of those constituents that have been paid off by the NRA will instantly turn their heads and not even listen.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really sad, because there are some, like we've been talking, there are some reasonable things. We're not trying to infringe on anybody's liberties to have a gun, to go hunting during the weekend with their family or whatever. But something that, hey, this could truly make a difference into the amount of school shootings we see, or the amount of mass shootings that we see outside of the schools.
Yeah. Like
semi-automatic assault rifles. What the hell do you need one for? Like, what argument is there against gun control that you would need a semi-automatic assault rifle? Are you going to defend yourself with a semi-automatic assault rifle? What, are you going to be walking across the street and you're going to get mugged when you're carrying an assault rifle with you? I don't think so. It's ridiculous. Like, think about just how much time it'll take to take one out, put your clip in it, load it up, and then kill someone. It's unreasonable to think an assault rifle will protect you in any sort of case. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. And I wish there were just more people who are willing to have honest conversations. But I don't think we're at a place where we're mature enough to do that. With Trump as our president and with the NRA just manipulating things behind the scenes. I don't think we're in the right place to have those types of conversations.
I think you're right, and it's sad.
Which I think
we're probably going to come on here in a couple months, and there's probably going to be a new shooting that happened.
And we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk. But I think the important thing is that we keep having these conversations.
That's right.
The best we can, and try to spread awareness. You know.
And just to end our conversation on this topic real quick is, I was actually in Australia this summer for an internship, and actually one of the first questions I got from people over there, when I kind of got to meet them and they got some time to ask me questions about what it's like in the US and everything, like usually they try to like give you a couple other things before they kind of jump into it, just to make sure they're not trying to sound super like against it, but they're always super curious to find out your opinions on gun controls and things like that. Like, I think second, third day that I was working there, they were like, so what do you think about guns? They kind of try to prod you a little bit to find out your thing. And it's super interesting, their opinion on it, because to them, like, just having a gun, like having any sort of gun, even just a little a rifle or just like a mini gun that you might be carrying around, to them, they think that's crazy. Because for them, they haven't had any sort of guns for like over 20 years.
Yeah.
And just hearing, like, when you talk about, I think it's all right to have a gun, like, I have nothing against it, like, they almost think that's ludicrous. Like, they honestly think over there that any gun that you own is just bad news. And I'm not saying, and I don't think we should go to that extreme. I don't think America will ever go to that extreme. But I just think it's curious how different societies place emphasis on the same thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And I think beyond just decreasing school shootings, I think something that we should bring up with Australia's gun control that they had and other countries that have had it is it's also decreased suicides by some crazy numbers. I don't want to bring up any statistics because I don't know them on top of my head, but I just remember reading about it and how it decreased suicides in Australia by like 50% or something like that. It was crazy. So, I mean, this, like, gun control doesn't just, like, can just target so many different things that are affecting today's society.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered that to the best of our abilities. And I think we've said basically everything we want to say. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
We can move on to the next topic.
Cool. So, FBI, Mueller, text messages, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, what I've read mostly about is just about how supposedly, not supposedly, but Donald Trump had sought to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller back in June, and that last summer he had directed to I think a lawyer or someone that was working for him to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and it wasn't until the guy that he had assigned to do it basically said that he basically was saying that he would he would quit and not do it, and basically that's when Trump backed down. But this is huge in the case that Robert Mueller is trying to show that Trump has been trying to has been hiding some things and has had obstruction of justice, and this only solidifies his case even more. Like, I might say it's a smoking gun in this case that Trump has been trying to obstruct justice.
Well, here's why I heard this was really important. So you know what the Saturday Night Massacre is, yeah?
Yes.
So for people who don't know, the Saturday Night Massacre is during Watergate, when Nixon fired his special prosecutor.
Yes.
And this was the first obstruction of justice charge that Nixon received. And the reason that this is really important is that attempted obstruction of justice, this might count as attempted obstruction of justice. Similarly, this isn't really news, but it proved that Trump lied many times about considering firing Mueller. Kellyanne Conway lied on his behalf. I'm pretty sure Jared Kushner lied on his behalf. He himself lied and said that he never considered firing Mueller. And now we just know that that is not true. Do you know who Ben Shapiro is?
Yes, I do
know
who Ben Shapiro
so Ben Shapiro is a right-leaning... I don't know where you'd label him. I know he's not part of the alt-right, but he's right-leaning for sure.
Isn't. He is right-leaning.
He speaks in a lot of places. He's got videos. If you search Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism or something, there's videos of him arguing with nervous college students, and then suddenly he's destroyed all of transgenderism or some crap like that. Anyways, so Ben Shapiro tweeted he tried to fire Mueller and he didn't fire Mueller. I don't see what the big deal is. And then somebody tweeted this screenshot of the there's an episode of The Simpsons where Sideshow Bob, who's one of the main villains of the show, had an attempted murder or something. He's well, it was just attempted murder. It's not even the real deal. Let's calm down, guys. No, this is this is a big deal. To me, this is the second, not even the biggest thing that Trump has done. I mean, if he colluded with the Russian, colluded actually isn't the right word to use. If he conspired with the Russians, that's actually the correct word to use. If he conspired with the Russians, obviously that's the biggest thing. But the biggest thing we have proven so far is when he said, I had no idea Michael Flynn had any connections or problems or anything like that, and then later on he revealed to have known that he did. That's obstruction of justice, almost bar none. I'm almost certain that will be a charge brought against him. But yeah, it's pretty big.
Like I said, it's a smoking gun.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been denying it since the beginning, but now that it's come out, I mean, it basically shows. First of all, I think it's crazy that the balls of, I think it's Don McGahon, who he was a White House general counsel. He was one who had refused to do it and said that he would quit if he forced him to do it, and that Donald Trump backed down at that point. But first of all, the balls of that guy, props to him for standing up for what he thought was right. But the smoking gun, I mean, clearly he was trying to fire Robert Mueller to obstruct justice. There's no other reason as to why he would try to fire him. You can't give a valid reason as to why Trump would want to fire Mueller other than that he was trying to obstruct justice. It just isn't. So I mean, that's pretty much over with, I would say. There's no way that you could rule against it at this point.
The only thing, and this has to do with this, is the only light, I think, for Trump at this point is these text messages that were found this week. So if you hadn't heard, 2 FBI agents, their names were Peter Strzok, Russian sounding name. I say that he has Russian connections. It's like a Eastern European ethnicity name that I don't know how to pronounce. And Lisa Page, 2 romantically involved FBI agents, one of which served on Mueller's counsel until these text messages were found out about. 10,000 text messages that they originally thought were lost due to a glitch in the Samsung phones that the FBI used, and now have been found. Apparently, show some sort of this is coming. I'm phrasing this in the most charitable light possible because I don't think it's actually anything. I'm phrasing this in directly the reddit.com/r/the Donald headline that I read this from, but that it shows bias within the FBI. That's what they're looking for here.
Okay.
Things that I have seen written in these text messages that people say are the most incriminating or something. One, I just want to point out, nothing in these text messages have been illegal. Nothing in these text messages have come out to even insofar as like undermine the investigation. The only thing that these text messages could show is that they have political opinions. But that being said, I mean, bias is probably bad. Let's see if they were actually biased. So one thing that was written talking about Hillary Clinton, she might be, this is discussing the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Quote, she might be our next president. The last thing you need is us going in there loaded for bear. Paige said that, the woman. And quote, you think she's going to remember or care that it was more DOJ, Department of Justice, than FBI, question mark? Agreed, replied Strzok, who was romantically involved with Paige, who led the probe as the former number 2 counterintelligence official at the Bureau. This is coming from CNN, by the way. So kind of sounds like they're just sort of concerned with how Hillary will view the FBI in that. I'm sure somebody who doesn't agree with me would say that that shows that they're going light on her or something. I heard that they had references to, quote, a secret society, which apparently I haven't seen the full context, but people are saying that it was probably just sarcasm, but Republican lawmakers are saying there's no possible way it could have been sarcasm, and I don't know what the implication is of that like the New World Order is real or something. I don't know. I really don't know what the purpose of all these things are.
And also, I think just the fact, so he came out and denied it today, and he called it fake news.
Trump?
Trump. The allegation that he had tried to fire Mueller back in June.
Okay.
He called it fake news and that it was typical New York Times. And I think that's just ridiculous because, I mean, I'm pretty sure the New York Times, without a doubt, is one of the most reputable news sources in the country.
It's one of the most Pulitzer Prizes of any news publication ever. Yes.
Okay. And for him to just, it's happened throughout his presidency, but for him to just discredit them just so rapidly, and I think it's almost like it's a cure-all for Trump. You know, he says fake news, and it's almost like, okay, let's forget about it. It's whatever. It doesn't exist. And I think that's just crazy because there is substantial evidence that shows that he did try to fire Mueller.
Yeah.
And
Sean Hannity admitted it. Sean Hannity literally admitted it.
Yes, it's ridiculous. And and then for even like his secretaries have been going on and just denying everything, saying, "Oh, I know nothing about that," or "No." It's almost it's ridiculous for them to just go on about this probe and saying like everything's fine and peachy when they really need to understand like this is potentially the beginning of our president getting impeached.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're taking it like it's nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just sort of the Trump effect that what would have been a month-long story a few years ago is now just gonna go away in a week. But God damn.
Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Doesn't look good for him. Don't really know what text messages are incriminating for the FBI.
This is an interesting question to bring up, but so our president has never been removed from office, right? So there have been 2 presidents that have been impeached, Clinton and Johnson, but neither of them actually got removed from office.
Clinton Johnson?
Yeah.
Andrew Johnson.
Yes, Andrew
Johnson.
Johnson.
I thought you meant Lyndon Johnson.
No,
for some reason.
Andrew Johnson. And obviously Nixon most likely would have been impeached, or well, he was about to get impeached and then would have been removed, but he resigned. Do you think Donald Trump, if he got impeached, would fight it to the end, or do you think he would pull Nixon thinking that he would just remove from office and try to save some face?
Yes, I do.
You think he would fight it?
Yes. Yeah, there's no doubt he would. He would, because this is his entire strategy is to be in the news, get publicity like that, rile up his base would literally be so happy if you tried to they would cry with tears of joy that he tried. This is what his base would want. This would, I mean, I'm pretty confident that if he gets indicted on obstruction of justice, he'll get impeached. But I don't doubt he'll try to fight it with every trick in the book. Yeah.
I just don't know, because Trump really, like, the main thing about him is that he cares about his image. You know, like there's a lot of reports out there that like he reads the newspaper about himself all the time, and he has this huge ego about himself, and he basically loves himself, right? And I don't know how much his ego would take a hit if he became the first president ever to be removed from office. You know, like you would be that's pretty crazy to think that after all these presidents, he would be the very first to be removed from office.
It's a very good point.
And you know, like at the very least, Nixon saved some face at the end. You know, he never actually got removed. He just resigned. Like, yeah, it still obviously it still looks awful, but he did save some face.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. Anyway, so we want to move on to the next topic.
Yeah. So this happened a couple weeks ago, but I think it's important to talk about because nobody talks about this in a meaningful way, because it's just nobody involved can have an opinion that's not stupid on this. I don't know any other way to put it. So a few weeks ago, Andy Warski, who has a show, which the purpose of the show is to get, I think, different people with different ideas together to talk about them, which is the most ironic thing I've ever heard. So he booked Richard Spencer because he can't seem to book a place at a university. Thinking face. So he was going on Andy Warski's show a few weeks ago. So Andy, with his co-host JF, who, oh boy, we could talk about for a while, know that he is a race realist. That is his words, which if you're not a dumbass, you know that means he's a racist. That he thinks that there's biological differences between the races, but that's not important because he's not even the star of this show.
He's not the star of the show.
There was Styx, who to be fair, I don't know a lot about, but everything I have seen of him, he just sort of seems like a useful idiot for right-wing politics. And then there is Sargon of Akkad. Oh boy. This guy, I think he sounds very intelligent, maybe because he's British, maybe because he's well-read. He has no clue what he is talking about, and it was so obvious. And he was the designated quote-unquote liberal, which he's from Britain. He's not a liberal. He is he like almost even says this in the beginning of the debate. He's like, I'm from Britain, where liberal means liberal and not progressive, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think it's very, very key to point out at the beginning. You know, we talked about this in the last episode about how we're basically trying to fight ignorance here, trying to bring up topics that need to be discussed that aren't discussed enough. And I think this topic especially is a really good point to bring this up. Is this guy who's some people believe an accredited podcaster, has thousands of views on YouTube, many followers, and says that this is a show where they're going to debate from many viewpoints, and they have basically 3 to 4 guys with similar viewpoints in terms of being alt-right, and then have one guy from Britain who's not as involved in American politics as the designated liberal. Is that a fair fight in any way, Dom?
No, it's not. And not to mention, Sargon of Akkad he's just not smart, at least in this conversation.
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that he definitely did not hold his own against...
Oh, I mean, I would totally agree with you there. So,
and I'm not going to say that guy's not smart, because he sounds eloquent. He definitely knows what he's talking about to some degree, but the things that he would bring up in his defense, like in times, were just completely irrelevant to what was being discussed.
Yeah,
I think you said you wanted to bring up a quote that he said about how like he was like, I stopped paying attention. Do you have the quote
down? I don't have it specifically written down, but it's like it takes place from about the 16-minute mark to the 21-minute mark of the video on Andy Warski's channel. And basically, they're talking about group rights. And Sargon poses Spencer this question. Spencer goes on probably a 4-minute diatribe about why we need to live in the real world and why thinking about things in the way Sargon wants to think about things isn't pragmatic. And Sargon tries to butt in at some point. It sounds like he's actually trying to get a point in this part. And Andy, the moderator of the debate, says, Spencer, let's try to get Sargon to have a word in. and it goes silent for like 5 seconds, and then Sargon's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I allowed to speak? Spencer was just talking so much." And then he's like, "Yeah, but Spencer, I think I'd really like to know what your thoughts are on," and he says some other question, and Spencer, and like everyone who's not an idiot watching is like, wait, Sargon, you just tried to get an appointment in for 4.5 minutes. Andy like cut Spencer off to let you get in it. You ask Spencer a question, and Spencer's like, "Wait, are you? I mean, I can answer that, but are you sure you don't want to respond?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, I just sort of zoned out in the middle of that really long rant that you just went on." And Spencer, rightfully, honestly, is like, "Okay, well, it's not my fault that you couldn't pay attention for the whole thing. Like, this is the dedicated liberal. This is the left viewpoint that you have debating. Like, nah, sorry, dog. Like." I don't know if he was just nervous and like he didn't know, or he's just outmatched or whatever, but this is embarrassing. Like, and Andy Warski has a responsibility, dude, to make sure that this doesn't happen. Like, he's just platforming Richard Spencer at this point. It's ridiculous that he markets himself as a free speech show, and this is what happens.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I when I watched the video, that part actually, I remember laughing to myself. I was like, "Are you serious? Like you're in a dedicated debate show, and you can't hold the attention for more than 3 minutes? And it's not like he was talking. Like he was saying the same thing for 3.5, 4 minutes. Like you could have easily made up your opinion about it within the first minute or 2 minutes and come up with a response. But instead, he completely ignores it and then deflects it to a completely different question. And they call him out on it immediately. I mean, immediately they call him and he's like, whoa, are you just deflecting the question? Why don't you try answering the questions I ask you?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just ridiculous that that's the one guy that they choose to represent the left viewpoint when you have 3, 4 other guys who are all sharing the right viewpoint.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna say that this is a free speech show that is looking at problems from different angles, that's just ridiculous. That's just absolutely ridiculous that you're gonna have that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's really nothing. The reason I wanted to bring this up today, was because people who have brought this up, the only response from Andy has been ad hominem attacks. He refuses to engage with anybody on this. So hopefully, my hope is by discussing this here today, we can hopefully get some sort of actual response from him about how he could have possibly let the situation get this dire. Because to me, it's just ridiculous.
And to make this clear, it's not like we're arguing their beliefs, which we could argue all day if we wanted to. We're arguing something pretty reasonable. Hey, don't call your show a free speech show if you're making these sort of things and your shows are clearly polarized and clearly sway towards one direction. If that's the case, just call your show an alt-right show and let it be there. But clearly he's not doing that.
Yeah, clearly not. Yeah, I just hope we could bring that up. If you guys want to check out the video which we're referring to, I'll try to link it in the description, but if I don't remember, which is a very big possibility, just Google Andy Warski, Richard Spencer, and you'll find it on his channel. It's probably one of his most viewed videos. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. It's just really, really, really dumb. Yeah.
And I think honestly, that show just really became a circle jerk of alt-right people sharing their viewpoints and agreeing with each other, and like it's just some crazy rhetoric that was being said. I mean, we're talking about people that believe in an ethno state for white people.
Yeah.
They believe it to their core that is like the best idea that could have happened. And for people that don't understand what an ethno state for white people is basically a country where only white people are allowed.
Right.
That's my best way of putting it.
Right.
And I mean, obviously there's so many things that we can talk about this, but I mean, there's so many. First of all, that's racist as a guest. I mean, these people believe that different races actually exist, even though it's been disproved by science for maybe 100 years, if not more, that has shown that there's no such thing as racial differences within humans. The only difference is melanin in your skin, and that's not even an accurate way to measure it. Because, I mean, I've met people from all over, from different parts of the world, all over the place, and what you would classify as being white, I've seen people that are like super dark, and people that you would consider being from a dark country being super light skinned. So I just think it's ridiculous that people to this day believe that there is such a thing as race, like different races.
Absolutely.
I mean, the core of the different races came from England as a way to classify and basically um, validate what they were doing in terms of um, going over to different countries and attacking them. I mean, basically is what it comes down to.
Right. I just think we should clarify, because race is in itself and this is going to trigger people. Race is in itself a social construct, and that
Yes.
phrasing is really important, because that doesn't mean race isn't real, right?
No, it's not real, but I'm saying in the scientific language that
There's just
such
no
thing as
there's just no
races.
meaningfulness to defining people based on race, is what you're saying.
Yes. I mean, social constructs, yes, like African American, Hispanic, Latino, like it's a thing. But I mean, in the way that they like to describe, like the way that
Exactly.
these people like to describe it, as in there are distinctive differences biologically to people with different races.
And
that's what they are arguing.
this is what's so dangerous about this, because when somebody, and the French Canadian co-host of the Warski show, JF, why his messaging is so cancerous is he can say, well, biologists have confirmed things that we knew in the past about race to be true, and there are things like that we have confirmed to be true, but they're not the things that he's talking about, right? He can confirm that the way that like melanin in the skin like produces different colors, and scientists have confirmed that like some of those things may have like a genetic component. They definitely do have a genetic component to them. Sure, JF, we got that, great. But when he says that, he extrapolates that, and then his dipshit audience that doesn't know anything about it takes that to mean, well, in the past we thought blacks were just dumber, and now JF just said that science has confirmed that what we once knew about we once knew about race to be true. So now we know that blacks are dumber. Whereas he's not actually talking about that, and that's why this messaging is so cancerous. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even think I would be well equipped to have a conversation with him. He knows more about biology than I do. You might be better equipped actually to do it, to argue with one of these people, Ben, because you probably know more about biology than me. But like, I don't think I would be well equipped to have, like, they know more about it, so they can misrepresent it from a stance of authority.
And I think that's another thing that we talked about earlier was like the things that these people say. Like if you're not really paying attention to it, like these are very eloquent people, well educated people, been to college, have been on many shows before, have had articles posted on all sorts of different publications, and like if you're just kind of listening to it, like these guys like obviously know what they're talking about, and it's easy for someone to just like start listening to it and be like, oh, that actually kind of sounds right. But if you dissect what they're saying and actually hear what's coming out of their mouths, you will see it for the bullshit that it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's just ridiculous. It's almost like when people say that the Earth is flat. That's kind of the best comparison I can think about it. Like, there has been ample scientific evidence that has shown that it's not. There's actually pictures of Earth from space that shows it's round. Yet these people still believe that these crazy thoughts. And I put it the same way. Like these people genuinely believe that there are clear-cut differences between races biologically, and that they are predisposed, like that basically white people are predisposed to be smarter, more intelligent, and more able to do things than other races, is basically what they're saying. And I mean, science, multiple studies, not just in like biology, but also psychology and other ways, have shown that there's actually, in terms of races, there's no differences between intellect, and that really it's more of the nurture side that it starts to come in, and obviously schooling and things like that, and culture. That's when we start to see differences in intelligence show up. But I mean, I remember this one study that was looking at infants from different races, and it was like up to year 2 or 3, babies from every single race were practically identical in testing for intelligence. And it wasn't until they got to around year 3, 4, or 5 and started actually getting more exposure to their society, to their culture, to schooling, when differences were starting to form. And basically, the study was saying that these things, that's where these things start to diverge, is not based off of their race, but in terms of their like what's surrounding them and who they're hanging out with. So, I mean, I just think it's crazy, and just this sort of language that's kind of being accepted nowadays, and more people are agreeing with it. I think is very cancerous, very dangerous, and I'm just afraid of the sort of people that they might be converting to their viewpoints.
Exactly. They reach a very wide audience, which is why platforming these ideas is so cancerous. Getting back to the original point, I don't think Andy believes in an ethno state, but you wouldn't know that unless you heard him say it, which I have. And the fact that I would bet, I don't have like a fact or statistic to back this up, I would bet that a majority of his audience believes what people like JF and Richard Spencer say. That's he has a responsibility to, I mean, I would say he has a responsibility to shut down that type of thinking. Somebody who's more prone towards free speech of all ideas, no matter how cancerous, would say that he at least has a responsibility to show the other side and the information from the other side, which he just clearly doesn't. So either way, I think he's in the wrong there. But I think we should move on to our next, or hopefully, probably our last, not hopefully, probably our last, get out of here, dude. Like, no, our last topic, which is something we visited last week, a really important topic, sexual assault, specifically talking about Michigan State University. This is like the most breaking news it can get. Larry Nassar was sentenced to 175 years maximum in prison. 160 women have come out with their stories about his sexual assault, and today,
really amazing story, honestly. I think,
yeah,
is how almost every single one of them came into court and looked them in the eye, in the face, and basically told the story. I think
the courage that takes is,
it was incredible, absolutely incredible.
Absolutely.
We kind of mentioned it earlier last week, but with the whole sentencing just happening this week, and as of today, more news coming from Michigan State, and the athletic director stepping down after being forced to, and a lot of more information coming out in terms of the football and basketball programs and the coaches. I think it's really cutting edge stuff was what we're getting at. And I think, I just want to applaud all the efforts of everyone that's been working so hard, especially in terms of sexual assault the last couple months. I think it's truly made a difference. That's basically, I think the media should really, after all the shit that they've been taking the last couple of years with Trump, should really applaud themselves for the type of writing that they've been doing. Because, I mean, the whole point of the media is to show injustices and basically to shine light and disinfect, right? That's one of the analogies that they love to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've really done a good job with the sexual assault the last couple months here, because we're starting to see concrete evidence of change, basically.
Yep, I think this is just the beginning. I think this isn't, or I guess I wouldn't even say this is the beginning, but there's much more to come. I think this started in this sphere. I mean, people coming out with their stories about sexual assault has obviously greatly increased last year, but at least in the college sports domain, I think this started with Baylor last year, or correct, 2 years ago or something. And I would not be surprised that if in the coming months we hear about more athletic programs that have these histories attached to them. And I think once, the stories of Tom Izzo and Mark D'Antonio and what they knew about and what they didn't know about, they are not connected in any way, at least not that people are reporting on right now. But once, fire starts at Michigan State, it's hard to contain that fire. And, once one thing breaks, it's going to be very easy for another thing to break. So I would expect the same thing to happen at universities down the line. I would not be surprised to see that it happens a lot more places.
Yeah, but I think Michigan State, I think what really comes down to is the way that I've been reading about it is that they had a culture of mishandling sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what that comes down to is repeated instances throughout the years where they clearly did just not do enough.
Or anything.
Clearly giving the benefit of the doubt to the players and the coaches over the victims, which is obviously changing nowadays. But, you can still point out where that culture exists in many places today.
Yeah.
But basically, now we're seeing people being held accountable for it. Athletic directors having to step down, some presidents having to step down, Larry Nassar going to jail, and hopefully many more.
Absolutely.
There are definitely many more people that you could possibly put some sort of jail time to. Who, specifically, I think there was one of the women who was in charge of specifically sexual assault violations within the university that had been hearing some of these claims and basically decided to do nothing about it.
Yeah.
Doing nothing is just as worse as you doing it almost, right? Not exactly, but kind of.
You're complacent.
If you're being complacent, I think they deserve at least some jail time in the Larry Nassar case specifically.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we are at the crossroads of something that we are going to look back on in 40 years and say that this time was a very remarkable moment that took a lot of courage from a lot of people to even be possible. And I think we're going to be really, really grateful that it happened. That people came out is what I mean. That I can't even believe that it has to be phrased like this, but that it's not okay to cover up sexual assault, that you're not going to get away with it, that people feel comfortable speaking out about it. And I think that for a lot of people it'll be uncomfortable. It'll be their basketball coach, it'll be the president of a university, it'll be their favorite actor, it'll be their boss, it'll be whoever, some people they've looked up to, people that and they've got to understand that that's not okay, and that doing something because they're just a really nice guy, they do so much for our university or our business or our brand, that's not okay. It's really interesting. I don't know what this is going to do to Michigan from a dumb sports side. I think this is going to put Michigan State, and similarly for Baylor, this will push Baylor back decades.
For sure. And I think it's crazy that, so I think it was reported that Outside the Lines, which is part of ESPN, how they were looking back, I think it was 2014 or something like that. They were looking into some sexual assault violations from the football team and the basketball team at Michigan State, and that they had asked the campus police to share their records with them to find out more information, and that they had refused to give them the information, which is illegal for those that you don't know, that these are public records, so they have the right to them. Basically, ESPN took them to court, and MSU lost, obviously. But by the time that ESPN was able to finally get the records of these cases, that they basically had been washed, that they had basically no information on them, and that the university had cleared up a lot of what had been said in these things, basically protecting their players. And I think, I just don't, I understand, I just think it's crazy that they went to that level to just deny ESPN to maybe write a story. Obviously they were going to make them look bad, but going back to it, basically just goes to the bottom line of people who don't care about morals or care about anything. All they really care about is the bottom line. Who's giving profit to the university? The players in the basketball team and the football team, right? If that means a couple women in the way of that get hurt, get sexual assaulted, and maybe commit suicide, who knows what, okay, that's a price we're willing to pay for getting millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think that's just insane. I think we're starting to see a change of that, and I think it should have happened years ago, but better late than never.
True. Yeah, I think that's just really well put. I don't know what else I can say about it other than I think that there's different levels of involvement here. I think that there's plain out denial. I think there's malicious activity to cover up. I think there is just neglect. But I think all of it is just as equally as bad.
For sure. I think this could be a topic for another day, Dom, but just college sports in general, just how much corruption there is.
Oh, for sure. Do you remember that story a few years ago with UNC's football team or basketball team? They figured out that 10 people didn't know how to read or something. Do you remember this? That was insane.
I remember that.
The lengths people will go to. It's crazy.
Or just even this summer, the whole Louisville controversy. Do you remember that?
Oh, well, yeah, they just with Rick Pitino. They just took their NCAA title away a couple days ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Michigan is the 2013 NCAA tournament champion, I guess now.
Basically, one of the more recent ones was that they were trying to get a 5-star recruit into Louisville, and that one of the sponsors for Louisville is Adidas, and they had recently signed, I think it was like the third largest deal with a university in the history. I think the first being UCLA, second being Ohio State, which like is more reasonable considering the fan base that they have and the size of the university. Like I think Nike pays, I forget how much the deal was, like a couple $100 million for like 10 years for OSU to wear Nike apparel, which is crazy. But Louisville being such a small school comparatively to these schools, and they got an insane amount of money from Louisville. But basically, so Louisville's now involved with Louisville. They put a big investment on them. And Louisville and Adidas actually worked together to funnel, I think it was close to $100,000 or $1 million to this recruit's family to basically get him to go to Louisville. And it was, obviously they figured it out. A lot of people got fired. And then there were bigger issues with the whole program at Louisville with, there were some allegations about strippers and prostitutes being hired for when recruits would go to Louisville, and they would have parties to try to convince them to go, and other just crazy stuff like that. So, I mean, that's a topic for another day, probably, about just the corruption within college athletics, but and also whether they should be allowed to be paid and things like that. But
that's an interesting conversation.
Crazy how, and then the body that regulates all of this, the NCAA, they're basically more corrupt than the actual universities themselves.
It's really messed up.
It's honestly ridiculous. Like, the body that's overlooking everything is arguably the most corrupt one there.
Yeah, I don't know enough as I could about it, or as much as I could about it, but like just the idea of like an independent commercial agency governing. I mean, similarly with the NFL, you probably don't have as many. Maybe you do have as many problems with the NFL. I don't know how to make that comparative statement, but commercial agency governing both public and private institutions, which is also in a way tied into like the NCAA has regulations that they have to follow, but at the end of the day, they're a profit-driven organization. It just seems to me like a recipe for disaster the way that it's set up. But that's probably a discussion for another time.
For sure. But yeah, that's I think that's a good amount that we got into today.
Yeah.
Great conversation, I think, over some really big topics recently, and some things that basically haven't been talked about enough in the news, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for, I don't know why you're here. Why do you listen? You idiot. Turn us off. I'm kidding. Thank you for sticking around. We have a Twitter now. Go follow at 2 Guys in a Pod. That's the number 2 Guys in a Pod, all one word. We have 1 tweet, I think, and 4 followers. So, I'll leave that there. If you guys liked this, I guess be sure to subscribe. And I think we're just sticking to uploading on YouTube now. This might be on SoundCloud as well. So if you're on SoundCloud, go ahead, check out our YouTube channel. It's 2 Guys in a Pod. After we didn't realize there was a 3-hour limit on uploads on SoundCloud, so we're going to be uploading stuff on YouTube. After this, I've been Dom. This has been Ben. This has been 2 Guys in a Pod. Ben, anything to add?
Nope. Thank you guys for listening. Second episode. Definitely be trying to come out with great new episodes to come. So thank you again for sticking around, and I hope to be hearing from you guys soon.
Yeah. All right. Peace, guys. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.